The forest of Ulmer 9 was silent like a place that had forgotten life. Tall black trees stood like broken towers, each one covered with glowing blue moss. A cold wind moved through the shadows and carried a strange smell of smoke and danger. Rain, a human hunter and supply runner, stepped out of his small landing craft. His boots touched the soft ground and a faint crunch echoed around him. He looked left and right, checking the mist that slowly circled between the trees. He did not come here for adventure or hero work. He came only for one thing: fresh meat for his ship crew. Rain had hunted on many alien worlds before. He knew where to set traps, where to move quietly, and how to read strange tracks on the ground. But this forest felt different. It felt like something was watching him from far away. He tried to ignore the feeling and continued walking. He only needed a few hours of hunting and then he could leave. As he moved deeper into the forest, a sudden sharp cry cut through the air. It was not the cry of a beast and not the voice of an adult. It sounded like a mix of fear and pain. Rain stopped and listened. Another cry followed, shorter and weaker than the first one. Rain sighed. Probably some small creature caught in a trap, he whispered. He did not want trouble, but he also could not ignore it. He walked toward the sound, pushing thick branches aside. The fog around him grew heavier, glowing softly in blue light. The ground was covered with old bones, small ones, big ones, and some too long to belong to any normal animal. Rain knelt and touched one bone. It was smooth and cold, and it looked freshly broken. This was not a normal hunting ground. Something big lived here, something dangerous. Then he heard it again, another cry, but this time very close. Rain pushed through the mist and stepped into a small clearing. At first he thought he was looking at a pile of broken stone. But then the stone moved and two small shapes curled tighter. Rain's eyes widened. They were not stones and not animals. They were two alien girls hiding inside the ribcage of a giant dead beast. The older one looked maybe 12 by human age. She had silver skin with faint purple lines running across her arms. Her eyes were large and bright green but full of fear. She held the younger one close, maybe 6 or 7 years old, who was shaking without control. Rain took one slow step forward. The older sister hissed and held a sharp bone in her hand like a knife. She tried to protect the little one even though she was clearly weak. Rain raised both hands to show he meant no harm. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The sisters did not understand his words, but they understood his voice. They looked at him with confusion and fear. The younger one's stomach growled loudly. She hid her face, embarrassed and scared. Rain looked around and realized something important. There were deep claw marks on the trees around the clearing. Fresh marks. Something had been hunting these girls for days, maybe longer. Then, from behind the trees, he heard a heavy step. A deep growl rolled through the air. The sisters froze. Rain felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He slowly turned his head. Two burning yellow eyes glowed in the shadows. The creature stepped forward. It was huge, taller than Rain, with long arms and sharp bone-like spikes around its jaw. Its breathing was slow and heavy. It did not look like a natural animal. It looked built, engineered, created for killing. The younger girl whimpered and grabbed her sister tightly. The older sister pushed the younger one behind her and lifted the bone knife again. Her hands were shaking, but she did not back away. She would fight to protect her sister even if she could not win. Rain acted fast. He pulled a flare from his belt, cracked it open, and threw it at the creature's feet. A burst of bright red light filled the clearing. The creature roared angrily and stepped back, blinded for a moment. Rain grabbed both girls by their arms and pulled them out of the ribcage. "Move!" he shouted, even though they did not understand. They ran through the forest, Rain pulling the older one while she dragged the younger one behind her. The ground shook as the creature chased them, smashing through trees like they were nothing. Rain fired a small shock dart over his shoulder, hitting the creature in the chest. It slowed down but did not stop. Its roar echoed across the forest like thunder. Rain spotted a narrow cliff passage ahead. He pushed the girls inside first and then followed quickly. The creature tried to enter, but its large body got stuck between the rocks. It roared and clawed but could not reach them. Rain breathed hard, sweat running down his face. The girls looked at him with wide eyes. For the first time, the older sister lowered the bone knife. She whispered something soft to him, her voice weak but thankful. Rain sat down on the cold ground. He stared at the two small aliens who now depended on him. He came here for fresh meat. But now he knew one thing for sure. He could not leave them here alone. The discovery had changed everything. The narrow cliff passage was cold and dark. Rain sat with his back against the stone wall, breathing slowly as his heartbeat began to settle. Beside him, the two alien sisters huddled close together, still shaking from fear and exhaustion. The strange yellow-eyed beast outside scraped its claws along the rock, letting out angry growls. But the opening was too small for it, and after several minutes the creature finally gave up and disappeared into the forest. Silence returned, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of people who did not know what would happen next. Rain looked at the sisters more carefully now. In the dim light, he could see their small bodies trembling. Their clothes were torn, their knees and arms covered with dust and scratches. The older girl held the younger one protectively, her small fingers gripping tight. Rain sighed softly. "I won't hurt you," he said in a calm voice. They could not understand the words, but his tone was gentle. Slowly, the older girl loosened her grip on the bone knife she still held. Rain reached into his pack and pulled out a small food bar. He extended it toward them. The younger girl stared at it with wide eyes. The older sister hesitated, unsure if it was safe. Rain broke the bar into two pieces and took a small bite himself to show it was not poison. He chewed slowly, then smiled a little. The girls watched him carefully. Finally, the older sister took one piece. She sniffed it, then handed it to the younger girl. Only after the little one ate a few bites did the older sister eat her share. Rain could see how hungry they were. They swallowed fast, like they had not eaten properly for days. After a few minutes, their bodies relaxed slightly. The younger girl curled against her sister's side and closed her eyes. The older sister looked at Rain, really looked at him, for the first time. Her eyes were bright green but tired. She pointed at herself and said a soft name that sounded like Leary. Then she pointed to the little one and whispered, "Mira?" Rain nodded slowly. "Leary and Mira," he repeated in a gentle voice. The older girl blinked, surprised that he tried to say their names correctly. She then pointed at him, tilting her head. Rain tapped his chest. "Rain," he said. Leary repeated, "Rain," struggling with the human sound. It made the younger one smile weakly. Rain smiled back just a little. It was a small moment, but it changed something. A bridge had formed between them, even without sharing the same language. The hidden story. After some time, Leary lifted her hand and drew shapes on the dusty ground. She was trying to explain something. Rain leaned closer, watching carefully. She drew a simple picture of a house. Then she scratched it out with a trembling hand. Her voice broke as she spoke in her alien language. But Rain could understand the meaning from her gestures and tears. Their home had been destroyed. Their people attacked. Their planet fallen under someone else's control. Leary then drew the shape of a long ship, sharp, pointed like a spear. She tapped the drawing with anger in her eyes. That was the enemy ship. The same ones who created the beast hunting them. Rain felt a cold weight in his chest. He understood now. These girls were not lost. They were being hunted on purpose. Leary continued her drawings. She drew two larger figures, probably their parents. Then she drew Leary and Mira behind them. Her hand shook as she made the bigger figures fall down. She wiped the figures with her arm, tears filling her eyes. Their parents had been captured, maybe worse. Rain felt something heavy inside him. He had seen many planets in trouble. He had seen many refugees. But something about these two sisters felt different. Something inside him woke up, a human instinct to protect. He had not felt it in a long time. The glowing stone. Leary reached into a small cloth pouch tied around her waist. She pulled out something wrapped in thin leaves. Slowly she opened it. Inside was a small glowing stone, soft blue light pulsing like a heartbeat. Rain leaned forward, recognizing it as some kind of alien technology. Leary held the stone close to her chest and whispered a soft word. Maybe it was a prayer or maybe it was a name. She then pointed at the stone and then at herself and Mira. Rain realized the stone was important, very important. Maybe it was the last thing their parents gave them before they were taken. Maybe it was something the enemy wanted. Maybe it was a key to something much bigger. Rain understood only one thing for certain. These girls were not normal survivors. They carried a secret, a danger, or a power. Something that made powerful enemies chase them across their own world. A decision forming. Rain looked at the dark forest outside. He could still hear faint distant roars from other beasts. He looked at the hungry, tired faces of the two sisters. He looked at the glowing stone resting in Leary's hands. He came here only for fresh meat. A simple job, a simple task. But now he was sitting with two children who had lost everything. And he knew one thing in his heart. He could not leave them here. Not in this forest, not on this dying world. Rain took a deep breath. "Come with me," he said softly, pointing toward the direction of his camp. Leary did not understand the words. but she understood his gesture. She nodded slowly. Rain stood and offered his hand. Leary took it, trembling but trusting. Mira held her sister's arm tightly, and together they stepped out of the passage into the unknown. The truth of the sisters was only beginning to unfold, and Rain was now part of it whether he liked it or not. The forest of Ulmer 9 looked even more dangerous when Rain stepped out of the narrow cliff passage with the two sisters. The fog had grown thicker, glowing faintly in blue and green colors. Strange sounds echoed between the trees, low growls, the rustle of wings, distant screeching. Rain walked carefully, holding Leary's hand while Mira clung to her sister's side. He kept his other hand near his shock pistol. He did not want to use it unless he had no choice. The forest was alive with hidden eyes. Anything could be watching them. Anything could attack at any moment. They moved slowly, following a path Rain had marked earlier with small light beacons. He usually used them to find his way back to camp after hunting. Now they were guiding all three of them through the dangerous maze of trees. After some time, they reached a small cliff edge overlooking the valley below. Rain froze the moment he looked down. 3 alien ships were landing near the forest. Not human ships. Not friendly ships. But the same sharp, spear-shaped vessels Leary had drawn on the ground. A cold fear ran through Rain's chest. "They found us," he whispered. Leary followed his gaze and gasped softly. Her hand tightened around Myra's arm. The little one hid her face behind her sister, trembling. Rain watched from the cliff as several tall figures stepped out of the ships. Their skin was dark blue, their arms long and thin. Each one wore black armor with glowing red lines. They carried weapons that looked like a mix of blades and rifles. They were hunters, professional, trained, ruthless. One of them scanned the area with a triangular device. A sharp beep echoed into the forest. Rain knew what that meant. They were searching for Leary and Mira. Rain stepped back from the cliff. "We need to move now," he whispered sharply. He pulled the girls behind a fallen tree and knelt. His mind raced, trying to make a plan. His camp was still far, and the enemy ships had landed between them and his landing craft. Even if he reached the camp, he might not reach the ship. But he had no choice. If he stayed here, the hunters would find them. If he returned to the cliff passage, the beasts would trap them. Forward was the only path. Rain tapped Leary on the shoulder. "Follow me," he said softly, pointing deeper into the forest. She nodded and gently lifted Mira into her arms so they could move faster. The forest turns hostile. As they moved, the forest changed around them. The fog grew warmer, almost burning their skin. Strange vines moved slowly like living creatures. Glowing insects swarmed overhead, lighting the path in eerie colors. Rain heard loud metallic footsteps behind them. The hunters were moving through the forest and they were moving fast. Their scanners beeped again and again, each sound closer than the last. Rain whispered, "We must stay quiet." He crouched low, guiding the sisters through a narrow path between thick roots. Suddenly the ground trembled. A huge creature with crystal-like horns burst out from behind a tree. It roared and charged toward them. Rain grabbed a flare and threw it into the creature's face. The bright light burned its eyes, making it turn away. The sisters clung to him in fear. But the roar had attracted attention. The metallic footsteps stopped. Rain heard a deep voice speaking in the enemy language. It sounded like orders being given. They were coming. Rain's human instinct. Rain breathed deeply. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from adrenaline. He had been in dangerous places before. He had fought things stronger than him. But protecting 2 children in a deadly forest while being hunted by trained soldiers. This was different. Rain crouched behind a fallen log and peeked over the top. He saw 2 hunters moving toward them. Their red scanning beams swept across the ground. One of them paused near Rain's footsteps. He leaned closer, examining the dirt. Rain tensed, preparing to fight. Before he could make a move, Leary touched his arm softly. She whispered a word and pointed to the right. There, hidden under thick plants, was a small tunnel formed by tree roots. Rain had not noticed it, but Leary seemed to know this forest better than he did. Rain nodded gratefully. He quietly lifted the plants, letting Leary and Mira crawl inside. Then he followed quickly, pulling the plants back down behind him. Inside the tight root tunnel, the air was cool and dark. They crawled through it slowly while the hunters walked right above them. Rain could hear their footsteps, heavy, metallic, dangerous. He held his breath as a red scanning beam passed over the ground above the tunnel. Mira whimpered softly in fear. Leary covered her mouth gently, tears forming in her eyes. Rain placed his hand on Leary's shoulder, giving her silent reassurance. After several long minutes, the hunters moved away. Their footsteps faded deeper into the forest. Rain exhaled shakily. "That was too close," he whispered. "The forest burns." Just when they thought they were safe, a loud explosion echoed through the trees. The hunters were not searching anymore, they were clearing. Smoke rose into the sky as parts of the forest burst into flames. The fire spread quickly, lighting the fog in bright orange colors. Rain knew what the hunters were doing. They were trying to force the sisters out of hiding by burning the forest. It was a brutal but effective method. Rain grabbed Leary's arm gently. "We must run," he said, pointing toward the distant hills. Even though she did not understand the words, she understood his urgency. She lifted Mira again, holding her tightly. They ran through the burning forest, dodging falling branches and fiery embers. The heat grew stronger with every step. Creatures screamed and fled around them. The ground shook as beasts fought or died in the flames. Rain pushed through the fire, guiding them toward a safer area. But then he stopped suddenly. The sound of engines echoed above them. Enemy drones? Fast, sharp, deadly? They were sweeping the burning forest, searching for survivors, searching for the sisters. Rain clenched his jaw. His camp was still ahead. His ship was their only chance to escape. But the enemy was closing in fast. Too fast. He looked at Leary and Mira, both exhausted, scared, and trusting him with their lives. Rain knew he had to make a stand. But how long could one human protect 2 hunted children against an entire enemy force? The answer would come soon. Because the battle was just beginning. The flames of Ulmer 9 rose high into the air. Orange light mixed with blue mist, turning the forest into a burning storm of smoke and heat. Rain held Myra's small hand while Leary ran close beside him, her eyes wide with fear. Behind them, the hunters' drones buzzed loudly, scanning every corner of the burning forest. Rain could hear the mechanical voices repeating the same command again and again. It was not human language, but he understood the meaning. Find the children. He pushed forward, guiding the sisters through a narrow path between giant fallen logs. He had only one goal now, reach his old survival camp and hope his ship was still safe. It was their only way off this world. But the hunters were fast. Their drones moved in sharp patterns, their red scanning lines cutting through the smoke. Rain looked at Leary and Mira. Their faces were tired, covered in ash. Leary still carried the glowing stone in her small hand, holding it close as if it carried her last hope. He whispered to them, "Stay close." Even though they did not understand the words, they understood his tone. They pressed near him and nodded. Enemy at the door. After minutes of running, Rain finally reached the edge of the forest. His survival camp stood at the top of a small rocky hill. A few supply boxes, a generator, and the small landing craft he used for hunting. It was old, scratched, and rusty but still able to fly. Rain's heart lifted for a moment, until he saw the lights. 4 enemy soldiers were already at the camp. Their ships hovered behind them, engines glowing in the dark. They were searching his supplies, scanning his ship, preparing to take it. Rain froze, pulling the sisters behind a large rock. "We're too late," he whispered with frustration. Leary clutched Myra's hand tighter. Their eyes were filled with fear and sadness. Rain closed his eyes for a second. He took a long breath. He knew what he had to do. If the enemy took his ship, they were all dead. If he tried to sneak around, they would catch him easily. There was only one choice now, fight. Rain steps forward. Rain stood and stepped out from behind the rock. He turned to the sisters and whispered, "Stay hidden." He pointed to a small cave opening near the rocks. Leary understood immediately. She pulled Mira with her and they hid inside the shadows. Rain walked down the hill, his steps steady. The hunters turned toward him, their helmets glowing red. One of them raised a weapon and barked something in its alien tongue. Rain lifted both hands slowly. "No need for violence," he said in a calm voice. But his calmness was only a mask for what he knew he must do next. One of the hunters stepped forward, scanning Rain with a device. The screen flashed with symbols. The hunter spoke sharply, accusing him of hiding the girls. Rain smirked. "So you can read that I'm lying?" he said. "Good." In one quick motion, Rain grabbed the flare gun from his belt and fired it directly into the hunter's face. A burst of bright red light exploded, knocking the creature backward. The other hunters shouted and aimed their weapons. Rain ducked behind a supply crate just as energy bolts lit up the night sky. The camp shook from the impact, dust flying everywhere. The stand begins. Rain's heart pounded as he moved from one crate to another. He was outnumbered, but he had human instinct. He had survived dozens of battles before. He knew how to be fast, how to be clever. He grabbed a metal pipe, a shock grenade, and a small knife, whatever he could use. The first hunter rushed toward him with a long blade. Rain dodged to the left and struck the hunter's leg with the pipe. The alien stumbled. Rain slammed the pipe into its helmet, making it fall to the ground unconscious. Another hunter fired at him. Rain rolled behind a fuel barrel, the heat of the energy beam brushing past his arm. He pulled the shock grenade's pin with his teeth and threw it. The blast hit the hunter, sending blue sparks all over its armor. It fell stiff, its limbs shaking. Rain breathed hard. 2 down, 2 to go. The sisters fight back. Inside the cave, Leary watched everything with fear in her eyes. She held Mira close. She wanted to run out and help Rain. She wanted to scream for him to run. But she knew she could not leave Mira alone. Suddenly, Mira tugged on her arm and pointed at the glowing stone. It pulsed brighter, faster, almost as if responding to Rain's danger. Leary held it with both hands and felt a strange warmth flow into her. She whispered a soft word, maybe a prayer or a memory from her mother. The stone glowed even brighter, illuminating the entire cave. She didn't know how to use its power. She didn't know what it could do. But she felt deep inside that the stone wanted to protect them. And protect Rain. The human who saved them. The human who fought for them. The final clash. Back at the camp, Rain faced the last 2 hunters. One rushed him with a blade. The other aimed a rifle, preparing to fire. Rain ducked, rolled, and swung the metal pipe. He hit the blade wielder's arm, making it drop the weapon. He kicked the alien backward, sending it crashing into a crate. The rifle hunter fired. Rain felt the burn of the beam passing his shoulder. He stumbled but kept moving. He grabbed a sharp metal shard from the ground and threw it like a knife. It struck the hunter's armor, making it flinch. Rain charged forward. But before the hunter could fire again, a bright blue pulse exploded through the air. Boom. The pulse knocked both hunters off their feet. The ground vibrated, dust rising in swirling waves. Rain turned in shock. Leary stood outside the cave, holding the glowing stone. Its blue light pulsed in her small hands. Mira stood behind her, clutching her sister's shirt. The hunters were stunned, helpless on the ground. The stone had protected them. It had saved Rain. Leary's knees shook, and she almost collapsed from the power she released. Rain rushed to her and caught her gently before she fell. Her eyes were tired but filled with trust. He held her close. "It's okay," Rain whispered. "You did well." The forest fire roared behind them. The enemy ships hummed on the cliff. But Rain knew one thing. They still had one chance left. The ship. If they could reach it now, they could escape this nightmare. The stand was over. But the hardest part was yet to come. The forest of Ulmer, 9 continued burning behind them. Smoke rose high into the sky like a dark cloud trying to cover the stars. Rain held Leary in his arms while Mira walked close beside him, holding the edge of his jacket tightly. The glowing stone in Leary's hands pulsed softly now, weaker than before as if it had used too much energy. Rain moved fast, guiding the sisters toward his landing craft. The last 2 hunters were still down, recovering slowly from the powerful pulse. He knew they did not have much time. More enemy ships would arrive soon, especially after that explosion. Rain reached the ship and opened the back ramp. "Inside," he whispered, gently placing Leary in one of the seats. Mira followed immediately, climbing in as fast as her small legs allowed. Rain closed the ramp and jumped into the pilot's seat. His hands moved quickly over the controls. The old ship made loud noises, complaining like a tired animal. But Rain slammed the ignition button, hoping it would respond. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the engines roared to life, shaking the entire craft. The sisters covered their ears from the loud sound. Rain gave a small smile, even in this moment of danger. "Good girl," he whispered to the ship. "Don't fail me now." The last attack. As the ship began to lift off the ground, red warning lights flashed on the screen. Rain looked out the window and cursed under his breath. 2 small enemy drones had spotted them. They sped toward the ship, firing small bursts of energy. The blasts hit the side of the craft, causing sparks to fly. Rain shouted, "Hold on." He pulled the ship upward sharply. The sisters gripped their seats tightly, eyes wide with fear. Rain twisted the controls left, then right, dodging the beams. But the drones were fast, too fast. They circled the craft, preparing to fire again. Rain took a deep breath and pressed the emergency thruster. The ship lurched forward with a sudden burst of speed. The drones were caught off guard and fell behind for a moment. But one of them recovered quickly and aimed a final shot at the ship's engines. Right then, before the shot could land, a bright blue flicker appeared at the window. Leary had lifted the glowing stone again, holding it with both hands. The stone pulsed once, then released a tiny wave of energy. It wasn't big like before. It wasn't strong, but it was enough. The drone's shot hit the wave and melted away before reaching the engines. The drone spun out of control and crashed into the forest below. Leary collapsed back into her seat, breathing heavily. The stone dimmed to a soft, fading glow. Rain turned and looked at her with shock and worry. "Easy, easy," he whispered. "You did enough." He gently placed a blanket over her small shoulders. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the seat. Mira held her hand tightly, whispering her name softly. Rain looked at both of them and felt something tighten in his chest. These were not just two alien children. These were two lives he was now responsible for. Two lives he had fought for, bled for, and almost died for. He turned back to the controls and pulled the ship higher. The burning forest shrank below them. The dark sky opened up. And finally, they broke through the smoke, rising into open space. A new beginning. Rain set the autopilot and turned around. The sisters were watching him with tired eyes. Myra's cheeks were streaked with ash. Leary looked pale, exhausted from using the stone twice. He knelt in front of them. "You're safe now," he said softly. His voice trembled with emotion. "Do you understand?" "Safe." Leary didn't understand the words fully, but she understood his tone. She nodded slowly. Mira reached out and touched Rain's hand, her tiny fingers shaking lightly. Rain squeezed her hand gently. It was a moment he knew he would never forget. For the first time in a long time he felt something deep and human. Care. Responsibility. Family. Rain activated the medical scanner and helped clean Leary's cuts. He gave Mira a small water pack and food bars. They ate slowly, still scared that everything could disappear at any moment. Rain sat beside them, silently promising himself something. He would not abandon them. Not now. Not ever. The decision that changed everything. After some time, the ship left the planet's orbit. Rain opened a communication channel to his station. He hesitated. He could not tell the truth. If he reported that he found two alien survivors connected to a powerful artifact, someone might take them away. They might be used, experimented on, or handed to the enemy. Rain pressed the call button and spoke clearly. "This is Rain. I have two minors in critical condition. No guardians, no family. I'm taking them to the station for safety." He did not mention the stone. He did not mention the hunters. He kept the secret to protect them. The officer on the other side replied, "Copy that. Rain, medical bay will be ready." Rain ended the call. He turned toward the girls. Leary looked at him with half-closed eyes. Mira leaned against him, finally relaxing. Rain whispered, "I'm here now. You're not alone anymore." The sisters did not fully understand the words, but they understood the feeling. Leary rested her head gently on Rain's arm. Mira held his jacket with both hands, refusing to let go. In that moment, Rain knew the truth. He did not just rescue them. He had adopted them in his heart. Two alien sisters, hunted by enemies, holding a mysterious secret. And he, a simple human hunter, had become their guardian, their protector, their family. The galaxy would soon learn what it meant when a human decided to protect someone, especially when that someone was a child. Rain looked out at the stars. A new journey waited for all three of them. A journey he never expected. A journey that began with a simple hunt for fresh meat, and ended with him saving two lives and creating a new family among the stars. The story closed on the soft hum of the ship as it carried them into the unknown. But one thing was certain. They were together. And that was enough.